Hello again. The thumbnail to this video shows a section in the Waterstones bookshop in London's Gower Street, just round the corner from University College London. This bookshop was formerly known as Dillon's, and it's one of the best in the capital. In the last year or so, though, it has decided to get with modern trends and now devotes a room to slavery, colonialism, and African history. I have, I think, remarked before that slavery is pretty much a universal human custom seen across the whole world at various times, from South America to China, India to Arabia, Europe to Africa. It was for most of recorded history simply an unremarkable fact of life, and it was never regarded as being criminal or wrong in the way that, say, theft or murder has been in most societies. It was only in Europe about 250 years ago that slavery began to be seen as inherently wrong, and gradually the European idea about this spread across the world until most countries abolished the practice. Had it not been for European influence, then slavery would most likely still be going strong across this planet. The transatlantic slave trade was neither the most extensive the world has seen, nor was it the cruelest. Nevertheless, it is the only one that anybody shows any interest in talking about. Of the 83 different books in the section on slavery and Waterstones, all except one were about the transatlantic slave trade. The exception was a book about the practice in Rome. This is frankly weird, that only one type of slavery is of enough interest for publishers and bookshops to make a thing of it, and that when you see a section in a bookshop marked slavery, you know immediately that it will only concern itself with that one particular type of slavery. One of the books I came across there was this awful thing. I hasten to add I didn't buy it there. I already had a second-hand copy. It's by Rennie Edo Lodge. Why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. I want to say a few words about it because I looked through a few of the books at Waterstones and discovered something quite horrifying, which was that those writing them did not really understand the transatlantic slave trade at all, and they were riddled with elementary mistakes. Intellectual rigour, though, is not required for such productions, even those from academic publishers. Of far greater importance is that the book should toe the official line. One or two of those books struck me as being little better than disinformatia, misleading propaganda designed to persuade readers into a certain way of thinking. I certainly wasn't about to buy any of them. Just to read out a few lines here to illustrate what I mean by this. But by happy chance, I already have a copy of one of the books, this one in fact. It's the reviewers of this book can hardly praise it highly enough. A wake-up call to a nation in denial, says the Observer. A revelation. The most important book this year. Powerful and important. My word, this book is destined to become a cult, searing, devastating. The book that's changing how we talk about race. Well, I mean, obviously many people think it's hot stuff. It's a Sunday Times bestseller, needless to say. The only problem is that it is one of the most misinformed and inaccurate books I've ever set eyes on. And the author, although she may well be black and have ancestors who were slaves, knows absolutely nothing about the transatlantic slave trade. Although she writes about it so well that even reviewers in the better class of Sunday newspapers are ecstatic about the thing. What do I mean by this? Am I perhaps exaggerating for dramatic effect? By no means. One need look no further than page 2 of this book, available at Waterstones, of course, and all good bookshops, for viewers to see the problem. Ready? Liverpool had been Britain's biggest slave port. 1.5 million African people had passed through the city's ports. 1.5 million African people passed through the city's ports. In other words, the author of this book, Reniero Lodge, thinks that 1.5 million Africans passed through Liverpool in the course of the transatlantic slave trade. This is A, completely false, B, raving mad, and C shows that Reniero Lodge does not even have the most elementary understanding of the transatlantic slave trade. The triangular trade, of course, operated as follows. Ships from ports like Liverpool loaded up with manufactured goods from England, and then they sailed to West Africa, where these goods were exchanged for slaves who had been captured by African leaders. Those slaves were then taken to the Caribbean and sold. Raw materials such as sugar, tobacco and cotton were then brought back to Liverpool, sold, and some of the profits invested in more manufactured goods so the process could begin all over again. It's called the triangular trade for this reason, that the manufactured goods went south to Africa, then the slaves were picked up and they went west to the Caribbean, and then the raw materials were picked up and they were taken east to England. You see what has happened here. Reniero Lodge has got muddled up and thinks that the direction that things were going was the other way round, and that the slaves were brought from West Africa to Liverpool. What possible reason would there have been for doing such a thing? Quite nutty. Nor is this any simple error. I'm looking now at page 5 of this book. Slavery wasn't just happening in Liverpool. Bristol too had a slave port, as well as Lancaster, Exeter, Plymouth, Bridport, Chester, Lancashire's Porton-le-Fayard, and of course London. Although enslaved African people moved through British shores regularly, the plantations they toiled on were not in Britain. Enslaved African people did not move through Britain's shores regularly. This is absolute bunkum. In other words, she has not got the faintest idea how the transatlantic slave trade operated. Children at primary school are taught this, and yet the knowledge seems to have passed her by. This, then, is the problem with the obsession we currently see with the transatlantic slave trade. Many of those writing about it, even in books so highly regarded by important newspapers, have no idea at all about the matter. I think we can all agree there's something a little worrying about this.